And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Motor City Metrics podcast. We're here to talk about all things Detroit Tigers and Major League Baseball. We're going to hit a lot of things tonight. The World Series is set, and got to get excited for that. It's going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers. And then we're going to hit a few more topics related to the Tigers, up and down, talk about what's been going on behind the scenes with some coaching changes. And then we'll just see what the gang is doing here. Joining me, Chris Brown. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. How you doing? It's
right.
fun being back, although it's a little bit odd. I just came back last week, and it's odd being back without Raj on the other side right now. But he said he'll be here in a few minutes.
All right. Well, we're waiting for Raj, our fearless leader, and of course, joining us as always is JFK John F. Kloss. Johnny, what you know?
It's been a while. This is the first time me and Chris have been on the pod since what was it? August maybe?
Yeah, I disappeared in September when I went on my Spirit Quest. I don't remember the last things that were happening with the Tigers at that point, but they didn't have a GM at the time.
Well, they finished reasonably strong. So yeah. Hey, listen. We had the always fortunate thing of having 2 Game 7s this week. Don't get that experience every year. The Rangers knocked out the Astros, and then the Diamondbacks played a really nice baseball game on the road last night to beat the Philadelphia Phillies. Chris, why don't you give me some impressions on what stood out to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's awfully fun when, to me at least, when I don't have a stake in any of these 4 teams. It's fun to me when the relatively young team that nobody thinks can win, it has no business being there in the first place, goes out and actually does win. And in a really impressive way, going and taking the final 2 games on the road. And I think, what did they, the 4 big sluggers for Philly went like 1 for 18 of those final 2 games or something like that. They just absolutely shut down. Last time I was here, I was talking about, like, look at all these great hitters. All they do is hit for power. And Arizona pitching got them. And it's hard not to be impressed with that.
No question about it. And, what's interesting is, John, we were talking about this. When you think about Brandon Pfaadt and Zach Gallen, there's one you depend on and one you hope for. And the Diamondbacks actually got more from the one we were wondering about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was not a believer in the Diamondbacks. I think I had them around 75 wins this year. They only won 84 wins. But I think a team like the Diamondbacks, if you remember, they were in first place for a majority of the season. And then they kind of had that rough stretch. I believe they fell to just at or below 500. And then they were able to pick things up. They were not even a team that did a whole lot at the trade deadline. They did get Tommy Pham, I believe. And I believe they got a reliever or 2 as well. But, yeah, this was a team. Yeah, this was a team, like, their pitching. It didn't look too great outside of Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. You really didn't know what you were going to get. Now, obviously, you had the young rookie who I'm not going to be able – it's Pfaadt. There we go. I was afraid I was going to mess it up. Brandon Pfaadt, who was fantastic, the 24-year-old. And I'm shocked. I thought it was going to be Houston-Philly. I wanted it to be Houston-Philly, if I'm being honest. I thought that would have been a really fun rematch. But, yeah, either Arizona is going to win their second World Series or Texas is going to win their first World Series and try to get redemption for 2011, which we all remember how heartbreaking that was for them.
That was a tough one. I'll tell you, it's interesting. If you would have told me that they were going to win, the Diamondbacks were going to beat the Phillies and not get at least one semi-dominant start from Zach Gallen, I wouldn't have really believed you, because when you look at their rotation – and where they're going to get their innings from, you're thinking Zach Gallen's got to be a guy. And, I don't know if maybe it's because it's October and he's getting tired, or it's just because the Phillies, have a lot of power. His fastball was getting lit up. It looked a couple inches shorter than it probably did 5-6 weeks ago. But the rest of that pitching staff really came through. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, they even had a full bullpen outing in one of those wins, right? Just bullpen. Yeah, and they traded. John mentioned they traded for a reliever. It was Paul Sewell, right?
Oh yeah.
I think it's Paul. But they also traded away a reliever. They traded away our old friend Andrew Chafin, who will get a World Series ring, presumably, if they win it all, which is kind of fun.
Yes.
But yeah, I bet you if you go back to the end of July or beginning of August or whatever, and look at our like good, bad, and uglies, I wouldn't be shocked if one of us, possibly me, had ugly for Arizona, because I feel like I remember talking, because they had a really rough stretch right after the trade deadline. It looked like they boned it by not getting better. But baseball's weird like that, and that's one of the things you hear a lot of consternation from the national media types about how this we didn't get the best teams in the World Series, and that just to me that doesn't matter. I feel like if you care that much, then make a bigger deal out of the regular season and award a trophy to the team with the best record in each league or whatever, a President's Cup or whatever you want to do, because you're never going to get the best team in a playoff format in baseball. I think we talked about it last week. I think you need to have a 75 game series for the better team to win every time, and you can't do it. So I think it's more fun this way. You get more interesting storylines. You get to learn players that you didn't know anything about, at least on a national level. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I wanted Houston. I'm one of the weird people who likes Houston. A lot of people seem to hate Houston.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's just me, always liking Verlander no matter what.
Sure.
But it's hard not to be like just marvel at what Jose Altuve has done, right? Like, 5'5" on a good day, second most home runs in playoff history now. That's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, I just look at. Oh, go ahead, you.
No, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just look at like the ripple effect of teams like Philly, teams like Houston losing, because these are teams with World Series expectations. I mean, I've seen a lot of people, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, saying the Houston dynasty is over and all that, and I don't really know if I can buy into that, because I can make the case that Houston's going to be better next year than they were this year. I mean, I think they had a down year in a sense this season with the injuries that they had. So I think like saying Houston, the dynasty is over, which I don't even typically think they were a dynasty, but saying this run of dominance is over for them, I'm not really buying into that.
I mean, let's face it. Hey, our fearless leader.
I agree with you. I think
Mr. Rogelio Castillo is here in the house.
Yes. Greetings. Continue, Chris. I would like to hear this. Or not.
Chris?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Everything got slow all of a sudden. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, everything got super slow for me. But in any event, I think it's weird to call Houston a dynasty anyway, because you've got like 3 players left over from that first title team. They've completely remade the roster. It's like the dynasty in Houston is the front office, and even they're gone. But the things they put in place over the last decade are what created these championship level teams. And like you said, a couple years ago, it wasn't Framber Valdez and Christian Javier and Hunter Brown pitching that rotation. You had, Dallas Keuchel and Verlander came in as the guy to get him over the top. And Carlos Correa is not there anymore. It's George Springer is not anymore. Like the heart of that first Astros championship team is mostly gone. Now the team that won recently, they're still there, but those guys aren't going anywhere. They still got Bregman for another year. They still have Altuve. Yordan Alvarez is still one of the best hitters on the planet. And like like you said, there's every bit that they're better next year than they were this year. So I don't think that's.
Let's face it, they were in Game 7. They're in Game 7 of the ALCS. I mean, the people who are saying that they're going to go away, I don't believe that either. I mean, they're going to have Verlander for the whole year next year, most likely, and like Yordan Alvarez and everybody else. That team's a good team, and that division, who knows if the Rangers are quite as good next year. I think they'll be right back.
So. Sorry, I just looked. They've been in the championship series 7 years in a row, right?
Yes.
How could you say the dynasty's over? What about that makes you think they're fine.
Yeah, and like they're gonna get a guy like Lance McCullers back too, and like I feel like that was kind of their Achilles heel this year was the rotation. Outside of Verlander and Framber Valdez, I mean Christian Javier kind of had a disappointing regular season, so getting a guy like McCullers back is just gonna solidify that rotation even more. And like you said, Altuve missed a pretty significant amount of time. Yordan Alvarez was injured. Jose Abreu had a down year. I don't suspect I suspect he's going to bounce back in 2024. So, yeah, I don't think a team like Houston's going anywhere. And even a team like Philly, I mean, where do they go from here with Aaron Nola as a free agent? They've got a lot of money invested in this team. It'll be really interesting to see because for me, it really felt like this was Philly's chance. I mean, they were able to get over the hump that was the Braves. I mean, let's be honest, they were the more talented team than the Diamondbacks. They should have beaten the Diamondbacks. I felt like this was arguably their best chance to ever, win a World Series with this core, and it'll be interesting to see if they can ever get back to this point.
I will say this. One thing that's interesting about Philly to me, that they have the same problem that a team that we're familiar with, Tigers, had. Bad bullpen. I mean, it's David Dombrowski is. I mean, he tried. I mean, they brought him that kid I liked a lot, Oren, sweet name,
Ryan Kirkering.
Ryan Kirkering, and that was a trial by fire thing. And usually, sometimes you see this paid off. You saw this. I mean, isn't it weird to think that in 2013 or when the Royals won the World Series, that they would trade that the Kansas City, the 2013 Royals team had a guy that we would end up seeing in a lot of in Toledo years later. And it's every time I saw him pitch, every time I was just like, I couldn't believe this is the same guy I saw pitch in the World Series. And that was the gentleman by the name of one Mr. Now I can't find his name. I'm trying to think the guy, was it Finnegan?
Brandon Finnegan.
Yeah.
Brandon Finnegan was in the World Series, and then you see him pitch for Louisville and barely get anybody out against Toledo. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And so Philly has some young pitching prospects in their system that I think will help them get back there. And I think that Philly will the NL East, now even with the Marlins right now with their tomfoolery, Lord knows what the Marlins. I mean, the Marlins talent alone are going to be fine, but now the question is, who are you going to put in the front office? Because whoever's going to be in the front office always has to be doing this. Because you literally had a GM that got you to playoffs, and you said, you know what, you're going to play second fiddle. What kind of confidence does that come in? But I think Philly isn't as bad off as people think they are. Now, Houston, pitching-wise, prospect-wise, the guy I got named by Spencer Arrighetti, who's considered one of their top prospects. It's not as deep as they usually are, but Houston will find a way to. I mean, they always find pitching somehow. They'll find somebody that's in the backfield of your house or something, and they'll do it. And Houston's gonna stick around because if Seattle keeps doing what they're doing, which is flopping and just, I think the biggest problem for Philly this year was last night the Diamondbacks bullpen. Give them credit. It was a dominant performance, absolutely dominant performance, and I've never seen a team like that. That back end of the Diamondbacks bullpen. Again, this is in Chris. You talked about this numerous times. You can get bullpen arms anywhere. You just have to identify the talent, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you need to get lucky. Sometimes, but yeah, sometimes it's just finding one particular trait that a guy has: a weird release angle, a funky spin, weird, seam shifted wake on one particular pitch, and figuring out how to mix and match that all together in a way that can befuddle opponent hitters. It's not easy. These guys are awesome hitters, but it's not easy to face a different arm slot, and different stuff every single at bat. It's not easy for anybody.
Right.
And I, it kind of, it makes me feel old to say like, I really preferred when you saw those guys going like 8-9 innings, and it still is cool to see that, but it's not as effective. There's years and years of data now that show us it's not as effective. Now, I mean, every now and then there's a Madison Bumgarner or whatever that doesn't matter, but yeah. So the teams that can embrace that and have the arms to do that are going to succeed, I think, more often than not.
I mean, Kevin Ginkel, that slide, that was one of that pitch was disgusting. And even the way you can see it coming off his fingers, almost like just the way Philly had no chance. I mean, no one could hold up on that pitch. I mean, Kyle Schwarber, when he got called for a check swing, first time was a strike. Second time was a strike too. Let's face it. That was just a judgment call there. That's how much of a difference this guy makes. And this is a guy who was drafted in the 22nd round in 2016. This guy's been around the Diamondbacks for a while, so he's been there for a lot of bad seasons. So for him to go on, even like last night, he was very emotional last night when they talked to him afterwards. I love the story of Arizona. The guy, I mean, Carroll looks like the guy who delivers your pizza on a Friday night. I'm sorry, he does. Like, to me, he doesn't look like, but effectively stinging the ball out there. A lot of people were complaining. I know that when somebody was, some of the national pundits were like, it's not the same because there's not these predominant teams. I think Stan wants to know, did Arizona win the series or did Philly lose the series? I think Arizona won it. They won 2 games on the road. That is hard to do. And especially Philly.
Yeah.
Philly's a hard place to play.
It's hard for me to say any team loses a series unless they just make a series of staggering and horrible errors, like a 2006 World Series, for example. But but other than that, like, yeah, you got to give credit to the team that went out there and got outs and scored runs. I don't think Philly made a series of, mind-numbing errors. I know Houston had a pretty rough one, I thought, in Game 7. I mean, that Game 7 was not nearly as enjoyable as the Arizona-Philly one, just because it was, unless you're like a huge Adolis Garcia fan, which was pretty spectacular.
I got a question for you guys. In terms of this World Series matchup, who do you think has the most pressure on them? I mean, I'm not going to say either of these teams don't have pressure, but at the end of the day, like me and Yooper were talking about this, you can never take this for granted. Like, you can look at these teams and say they're young and they have, young talent that could lead them in the future, but there's no guarantee you ever get back to this point. So what team do you think has the most pressure on them to get the job done? For Arizona, it would be their second World Series title. And for the Rangers, like we talked about earlier, righting that wrong in 2010 and 2011 and them finally getting over the hump.
Boy, there's something to be said for the pressure of being the favorite, right? And I got to believe Vegas has the Rangers as the favorite. I haven't looked, but I'm just making an assumption. So right there, you have that expectation that you are expected to win. And that can be tough, especially if, the Diamondbacks steal Game 1. That could be a bit of some pressure for them. Now, I will say the Rangers have such a deep lineup. It's going to be a fascinating matchup to see how many outs the Diamondbacks can get from that bullpen versus that deep lineup. Now, the Phillies had a great lineup too, but now you're challenging the Diamondbacks to do it again. So what we're going to see.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's more pressure on Texas. So I lost my train of thought there for a second. I was thinking, blanked out there. Texas, I think for the Rangers right now, the biggest thing for them is the money they spent. That's going to be, because the narrative is going to be, well, you spent all this money, you made all these trades, and they have the pressure where Arizona can walk in and go. No one, you could say in the beginning of the year, based off their season record, that maybe some people expecting here, but you look at 10 straight losses in August and the way they kind of fumbled towards the season, no one expected them here. Nobody. If you had Arizona in your World Series, betting them on the World Series, then you're a rich man. But I highly sincerely doubt that. So I think Texas has the pressure because they have some of the bigger names, some of the money they have spent. Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Max Scherzer, the trade with Max Scherzer. But then, like, Houston fans were whining, like, well, this team has been bought. Well, hi, Josh Young here. Garcia, who got passed up by every team on the waiver wire. Another Cardinal outfielder. Well, gee, I wonder where we heard that before. Oh, wait. Ask Tampa about that.
Yeah. Evan Carter, awesome story.
Carter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you guys. I think there's going to be more pressure on Texas because they, as you said, the higher payroll, the higher expectations, the better regular season. That said, as soon as the first game is over, the pressure is on the team that lost, right? Like, you only get, like, it doesn't really matter. So we got one game to think about who's feeling that pressure. But I tend to, I assume Texas is favored, and I think they should be. You talked about how deep that lineup is, and I think that's the key. Is for as good as the hitters are in Philly, we saw a little bit of that Jekyll and Hyde, not Heckle and Jekyll, the Jekyll and Hyde nature. Where they were just bombing the ball, and then there's just a little bit more all or nothing in those guys. Schwarber hit 190 this year.
Yeah.
And Castellanos, we've seen Castellanos plenty. We know that he can get on these heaters, and then he'll just start swinging at every slider. And I just think that the Texas lineup is too deep. There's too many guys who can hurt you in there that even if half of them catch a cold streak at the same time, you can get bailed out by Mitch Garver and Jonah Heim and Evan Carter and Nathaniel Lowe. There's just a lot of talent in that lineup, and I mean, it'll be fun. It'll be a fun challenge for Arizona. It's going to be tough for them to navigate that lineup 3 times, 4 times a game. 4 times.
Yeah. What else is really interesting to me is just the teams that didn't make the World Series. What could potentially be next for them? Because you look at a team like the Tigers, they could be active in the trade market. Was there any teams in this postseason that maybe didn't reach the expectations they were looking to reach, and maybe they're going to be looking to retool in a way? Because every offseason it feels like there's a team or two that looks to reset, rebuild, and kind of reset things. I wonder if there was any teams in these playoffs that disappointed, like a team like the Blue Jays or the Brewers that haven't been able to get over the hump, that are going to kind of look to retool and revamp their team this offseason, and kind of just tying it back into the Tigers. And could that be a potential trade partnership right there?
Well, certainly the Brewers, right? I mean, a lot of people think they're losing some free agents. This is going to be the time, if they're going to kind of look to make some changes and hopefully reload instead of rebuild. They could be very active in terms of making some changes in their lineup.
I think of, I mean, the obvious one to me that popped in my head was the Dodgers, right? Like, they were hugely disappointing, and everybody's expecting them to go get Ohtani anyway, right? Like they didn't do a ton in last year's offseason, so they're probably going to make a big splash. I could see the Braves, they had that historic offensive season and then just couldn't get past the Phillies, right? It was, they just didn't have the pitching. Be kind of a gut punch if they go out to Philly, maybe if they go out and get Aaron Nola.
Wow, yeah. Wow, that could be a landing spot for Eduardo Rodriguez too.
Yeah.
There's one team that comes to mind too that I think of is the Seattle Mariners, because Seattle, let's think about it this way. Seattle's in a standpoint, they have some good prospects in their system. They have some guys that they could, like a guy like, for example, who came up, we thought he would be a little better than what he was Emerson Hancock. Mm-hmm. But Seattle, I look at it this way: but their system has a couple guys that are really kind of somewhat on the cusp or really far away. So what do you do if you're in the Mariners? You know that they love the trade. You know that Jerry is itching to pull that trigger to do something. But the question is what? The rotation. See, I think the Mariners have some questions about whether or not they can get, like, for example, Luis Castillo. I mean, while he towards the tail end of the season, Texas got to him pretty quickly. But, I mean, outside of, like, they have a pretty good rotation. The top 3, Logan and Gilbert, Herbie, and Castillo. But what else do you have to do? I mean, you trade Paul Seward now, Yeah.
That was interesting.
Oh boy. So I don't know if I'm the Mariner. I mean, you have Andres Munoz, which is a good thing to have. I mean, they have some good quality pieces there, but do you continue to go up and continue to trade your farm system to go against these teams like Texas and Houston, or do you stay the course and see what happens?
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw the report of Juan Soto and the Yankees. I don't know if you guys saw that. I mean, if Juan Soto is going to be available this offseason, I mean, I think there's plenty of teams. And if you look at a team like the Mariners, I mean, I feel like their issue is they need more offense.
Well, I saw a report today of the Mariners and Soto as well. So that link has been put out there too. And it makes sense. I mean, as Raj said, the Mariners will make deals. They're itching to pull the trigger. So you could see them going for Soto.
And they have a couple of what everybody wants and young offensive middle infielders. They got Cole Young, who looks pretty good, and then this year they took Colt Emerson, I think his name is, who had a really nice pro debut. So those would be some pretty strong starting points to any big deal. We saw him do it with Castillo a couple years ago, right? Who they give up Noelvi Marte and was it Michael or the other? There's an Arroyo kid, I thought, but
yeah, and Marte looked pretty good in his debut with the Reds too. He had a really good year overall.
But if you trust your system and you trust your drafting and development, you can trade guys if it gets you help in the big league level. And I could definitely see Seattle doing that.
Yeah, I think in Toronto too. I mean, John mentioned Toronto, and I think it was a good idea to mention the Blue Jays because imagine being a Blue Jay fan. You're talking about this crop of young players, like the nepotism kids. It's another word to describe it. I mean,
legacy crew.
Yeah, legacy crew. There we go. That's a better word. It's in terms of, it's just like, what do you do if you're the Blue Jays right now? And Toronto's farm system too is not as deep as it used to be either. I mean, you traded a lot of that away, so the Jays also have some tough decisions to make. I heard about on the way in today. There's unfortunately another mass shooting in Maine.
Oh, jeez.
At a bowling alley and in a restaurant. So they reported 16 to 22 are dead.
Oh my God!
Oh my!
I missed that.
Yeah,
I did not hear that.
Huh.
So
up there to see the fall colors.
Huh?
That's a bummer.
It is a bummer. But getting back to it though, I mean, I think if we're going to look at teams in terms of the Tigers, sign us back in the Tigers because we also got some Tiger. You guys didn't know about the Tigers news yet, did you guys? Yet?
No.
Okay. With Detroit, I think you look at it this way. You look at a team like the Cardinals. You look at teams who are going to make a push. I would come knocking at St. Louis for an outfielder. I would look at teams that were on the cusp. St. Louis was on the cusp. What am I kidding? They were far away from that, but maybe a team. I mean, look at the Reds. Like the Reds, for example, are teaming with prospects. The Reds could use a couple starters.
Yeah. What about the Athletics? I think we talked about that before the show, but I feel like
trade them like a Little Caesars pizza, a possum, or trade them for
possum remover.
Yeah, possum. Yeah, trade them possum traps, a Little Caesars pizza franchise, and a case of Faygo. Cola for a couple guys.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? Brett Rooker, the outfielder. He had 30 home runs.
Yeah, but then you also got to realize too his number splits are a little weird too. But I mean, hey, look, whatever I'm sure they need a little bit of everything, or even money right now, because I mean, for Christ's sake, the A's are getting the owners trying to sue Vegas because they're trying to pass a millage for the schools, and he's suing because Vegas is not letting him have more money. Like, dude, quit being such a cheap, and man up already. Good grief.
Yeah. Right, I can throw one more team at you, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. We had a couple comments about them. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
They're always looking to retool, and I'm just looking at some of the talent they have offensively. I mean, Brandon Lau, I wouldn't say is exactly young anymore. He's been there for a while. Could they look to move him to make room for some of their young infield prospects? Randy Arozarena, I don't think they've extended him yet, so he could be a right-handed bat as well. Tyler Glasnow, I mean, we saw what they did with Chris Archer. Could they look to trade him as well? I feel like there's a lot of like smoke and mirrors with them right now just because of the Wander Franco situation. Unfortunately, they extended him, and it looked like they wanted to build around him. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they're going to do because it feels like nothing is really guaranteed with them right now.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me.
I think the Wander Franco situation is going to kind of hover over them for a while. That's really a dark cloud.
Yeah, I don't know if Junior Caminero is going to play first base or third base or what, but it wouldn't shock me if they end up like trading Paredes.
Well,
something
actually,
like that.
and I was thinking Yandy Diaz would be as a player I
Yeah.
really like. If you stuck Yandy Diaz on third base for the Tigers, I mean that's a 400 on base percentage and a little smidgen of power that would be a big boon to any lineup.
I'm still about the Baltimore Joey Ortiz deal train. I'm still on that train. I'll live and die by that train. Honestly, it's So let's get into a little bit of the Tigers news too, because the Tigers did make a couple of little things that normally I think it's fair to say that may not exactly burn up the waiver wire kind of thing. But the first and foremost, I want to mention our Tiger minor league breakout player of the year, Justice Bigby, had 4 hits last night, and somebody mentioned in the chat he had another hit. I'm putting together a video package that'll be out tomorrow or Friday about Justice Bigby's season, and so that's something to celebrate. And I say that not because we did an article on him, but it's really, really fascinating stuff. Like it's good to see this ascension on him. But I do want to play something for everybody this evening that I think is probably one of the best pieces of content you will see. And I'm trying to get it to play, so hopefully it will play on my computer. And let's see here. So this is Jackson Jobe. I don't know if anybody watched this yet. Probably not, perhaps not, but he was on MLB Pipeline Pitching Lab, and he was recapping his AFL season, and so he really had a good way to end the season. So let me go ahead and put this up here real quick, and I'll show a little bit of like how he's talking about grips and what have you. So it's gonna try and sync up the audio at the same time the video is. So bear with me here as let's try this now.
Four-seam fastball, I try to split the middle of the ball with my middle finger, and then let this kind of rest over here, and then I'm kind of half tucking my thumb, and really just trying to stay behind it, get as much backspin as possible, get some perceived carry, and this bat to out the zone. That's kind of the idea on that one. In a perfect world, I like it to be like 18 plus vert, then horizontal. I don't really pay a ton of attention to. Try to get as much of perceived ride as I can. To get misses at the top and then takes at the bottom. Yeah, I mean, it's probably different for me than it is for other guys. I think everyone has their own views, but for me, like I throw a lot of sliders and changeups too, so I'm doing a lot of this with my wrist. So I really just try to keep my wrist as stiff and still as possible, so I can just stay right here, right behind it, because that's the key. Staying behind it and getting as much efficient spin as possible. Slider grip, just like a traditional two-seam grip, right in the middle. And the way my arm slot is, I can't really throw a true curveball. So with my slider, I try to think curveball to prevent me from getting under it. I notice that most of my misses with my slider are when I get under it. So I try to stay on top of it to get some depth as well as some sweep. Obviously, we just talked about the whole sweeper thing. And I say my slider on average gets anywhere from 10 to 17 inches of horizontal. So it is kind of like a sweeper, but as far as depth goes, I think I get a little bit more depth than a traditional sweeper. And I try to throw it a little harder than some of the sweepers out there. I think it's a little different, but you can definitely categorize it with the sweepers. At the vert, I try to keep like 0 to -1. So when you start getting to like -5 and more, it gets to be more of a curveball. And then obviously if I get like positive vert, kind of where I'm getting under it, so I don't like to. I try to stay out of the positives, but not get too deep into the negatives. I think like the first time TrackMan or something was put on me, I was 16 and I was spinning it at 3,200 RPMs and everyone loved it. And I had no idea what it meant. So yeah, I think that might just be a God-given thing right there. I didn't really work on it or anything. I just kind of had it, I guess. The cutter we got, so it's like my four-seam grip, but I kind of offset it this way, and then same thing, kind of half tuck here. And really try to put pressure on my middle finger here, and then it's just kind of whip it as hard as I can, like a fastball. And with that one, I'm trying to get a little bit of horizontal movement, but I want to be able to throw it in the low 90s. So we're looking at like -3 to 5 inches, or -3 to 5 inches of horizontal is kind of where I like it to be at. Obviously, I have the slider that's bigger, so this one's a little easier to control, especially behind the counts. I like throwing it too low, 3-1 in situations like that and getting a ground ball. But yeah, that pitch has been great for me this year. I'm still figuring out kind of how to use it and when the best time is to use it, but it's definitely been a good weapon for me this year. The changeup's a little different for sure. It's kind of like a split change grip. So I'm here, and the biggest thing for me, I used to throw it like this. I think last year, and this year I moved it. I moved it up here to get on this seam. And most guys you talk to, I feel, try to pronate off of their middle finger, whereas I try to pronate off my index finger. So I try to get this seam and then really pronate through it. And then the split, I feel like some of the spin, which is going to give it some more depth. So yeah, I mean that pitch has probably come the furthest for me this year from where it was last year as far as like comfortability.
All right. That was Jackson Jobe. By the way, you can find it on I found it earlier on Twitter, and I came across it, and it was posted by Sam Dykstra, who does really good work covering the minor leagues for MLB. So worth checking out. You can also find it on Tigers.com as well. So, but I wanted to show that because, pardon me.
Well, a couple things.
Yeah.
One of the in the chat, someone just said that he looks like he put some muscle on. He does look like he put some muscle on. So that's kind of interesting. It's interesting that he's 6'2".
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I think that's what he's looking at.
Yeah. To me, it's hard to believe he's 3 inches taller than Sonny Gray. Because I see Sonny Gray there sometimes. It's like he's a harder throwing version of him. I don't know, but I could be way off on that. But and the other thing was that umpire had a pretty damn big strike zone in the Arizona Fall League.
Well, I think they're using the ABS out there. So maybe, but they've been known to play with things out there too. So maybe it's a wider ABS strike zone. Although maybe they didn't use it in every stadium. I know that they had Hawkeye equipped in several of them, but maybe not all of them. I'm glad he mentioned the changeup there at the end. That was, by the end of the year, that was like my favorite pitch from him, because he would throw it to right-handers in any count and get swings and misses against righties and lefties. And I was really impressed with the development of that. So, yeah, I mean, he looks pretty damn good. Still has to build up the innings next year, and he's done this year in the AFL, right? 4 starts. I think he got 15 innings or so. But it wouldn't shock me at all if he's in the big leagues at the end of next year. He may hit an inning limit that will prevent him from that, but I think the rest of his game will probably be close to ready for big league hitters next year, or at least to get beat up by big league hitters next year. It takes time, right? Even Brandon Pafat had a rough go before turning it on later.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good segue, Chris, because you want to talk about like prospects that we thought could make the team in 2024, and I think that's a good talking point right there.
Well, yeah, my buddy Rob, who texted me about baseball and pretty much baseball exclusively, randomly asked me. He said, "Which prospects are going to make the team next year?" And I was like, "Well, you mean opening day or over the course of the season?" And he said, "Both." And I don't know if anybody, like, prospect wise, that hasn't already been to the big leagues will crack spring training with the Tigers. But I was able to rattle off like 12, 13 names of guys who I think could conceivably be in the big leagues at some point next year. Now, it's hard to, basically turn over half your roster with prospects. But, yeah, it's not hard. Like, there are a lot of guys who are knocking on the door or could be by midseason next year. And I just went through. You got Colt Keith, right? Of course, everybody wants to see him. And Justin Henry Malloy. They're both there in AAA. You also have Winslow Perez and Eddie Leonard, who are both up in AAA. Justice Bigby made it to AAA at the end of the year, hit 340 on the year. He's a guy who might get a shot. Jace Young got up to, 28 home runs this year?
Yep.
And they're having him play third base. I don't think they're doing that for no reason. So he's got a chance. And then you go to the mound. Kyler Montero has a good chance to make the team in some capacity. Tyler Madison, our reliever of the year, had an awesome season. Ty Madden, Wilmer Flores, these are all guys who have been in Double-A or going to be in Triple-A next year. We mentioned Jobe. It seems like an outside shot, but he's the most talented, so it wouldn't shock me. And you got like Brant Herter could make the team. Jack O'Loughlin, theoretically. Blake Holub. And this is not even to mention the guys who are still technically rookies and prospects. Parker Meadows, Sawyer Gibson-Long, I think Andre Lipsius and Ryan Kreidler are all still technically rookies and prospects. So, yeah, I mean, like, how many of those guys will actually come up and make an impact? I don't know, but there's a lot of bodies that they're going to have to sort through. And then this is one of the reasons that Roger and I have talked about this, that I think Rogelio thinks there's going to be a prospect deal. There's going to be some trades involving Tigers prospects.
Yeah. And speaking of prospects, by the way, so per Evan Pessold of the Freep, the Tigers hired Chip Lawrence, who was a runner-up to Mark Connor for the scouting director job, as a special assistant for scouting and global cross-checker. The other news that came out that was also reported by Evan, and I gave him Gabe Alvarez's number, so this was pretty funny. The first baseman, first base coach is not coming back. Is Alfredo Almazega. Thank you. Again, Hispanic. Yeah. I can't say Hispanic names. Won't be back in the organization, so he won't be back. So there's been talks about potentially Gabe Alvarez. It's been talked about getting up there, and he had a really good spring. He was with the Tigers in spring training. I mean, first 2 seasons, he brings Erie to the postseason and gives them a championship. So what else I think at this point he should be the foregone conclusion, but we'll see. But the Tigers have not confirmed any of these things yet. So, but yeah, there's other little changes in mind too. So I'm trying to think of what else I was going to go with. Yeah. See here. There's a couple of like little they're longtime medical guys leaving. Assistant athletic trainer won't be back. Team director of team travel won't be back. And so so these people sorry, go ahead, Yooper.
A couple of those jobs yesterday when I came out, I was thinking about that. What goes into changing the traveling secretary? What did he F up?
I think a lot of these I think were inevitable. But guys got an extra year, or they had an extra year in their contract, or whatever. These are all inevitable changes that are coming with a new president of baseball operations, and maybe the new GM has some people that he wants to bring in. So I think a lot of that is just, you see some of these longtime scouts. I heard about scouts leaving the organization last month. A lot of this news takes a while to filter down to the newspapers, or whatever. And that's just the way it's going to be under a new. The new leadership is going to bring in their guys in everywhere, including their traveling secretary, I guess. I think
Amazaga, the first base coach, right? He actually played with Miguel Cabrera, right, in Florida, and they were supposedly buddies. So you wonder how much of that was into it. Now Miguel is gone, and their use for keeping one of Miguel's friends around is gone too.
Come to think of it, Chris, I just realized the national cross checker for the Tigers, James Orr. Some of these people I've never seen in a game, and all these. I'm like not to sound like a dick, but I am sounding like a dick. But I like some of these scouts. When you start looking at their names or their what they look like, you're like, wait a minute, I never seen you at a game. It's probably there,
if we don't know exactly what they look like, somewhere between 60 and 80% of scouts look exactly the same. Yeah. They're all wearing the same collared shirts and the khakis, and they might have the fisherman's hat if it's hot. Yeah. And but yeah, that's just the way it goes. That's a guy that the Tigers have added a lot of talent to the system over the last couple of years. I just mentioned, and who is it? R1 VJ4 mentioned Dylan Dingler. I totally forgot Dylan Dingler. It's completely plausible that he could see the big leagues next year too. But yeah, they won new scouting people. They want new cross checkers. They probably want a lot of different things, and so now's the time to do it.
This
You know,
is
it's
time.
always.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just it's always tough when people lose their jobs or whatever, but it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's the time when you're bringing your friends in. This is the time where you're like, hey, look, I got a job with the Tigers. You want to get a job? That's what I'm sorry. That's
Well, and so the Chip Lawrence one is probably the most interesting. Did they say he's now the new cross checker, or no? You said he's
a
new
special assistant
special-
to scouting and global cross checker.
because he's got a pretty long scouting history. I think he scouted with the Blue Jays and the Phillies and San Diego for the last decade or so. But he's also a guy who's started a foundation that got kids from historically black colleges or black schools to come and try out for coaches and black coaches and stuff like that, just to kind of help. Everything in baseball is really about who you know, right? It's just like anything else, and your buddies, you get them a job, and it turns out they're good at stuff, and so just trying to increase that network for kids who might otherwise not be able to make it in baseball, and it's just an interesting story, and I'll be watching to see what what he does with the organization.
Yeah, and I feel like just bringing it back to like your discussion, Chris, like I think the more important question is just how many of these prospects, because I think the Tigers already have a lot of young players on their roster. If you think of guys like Reese Olson, and I mean even guys like Skubal and Manning, I wouldn't say by no means are seasoned veterans. I think with all those players you mentioned, there has to be some sort of move to where they can package these guys together to get a win now player. Because if we've learned anything from these playoffs, it's that like the Diamondbacks won 84 games and they made a run to the World Series. The Tigers lost or they won 6 less games than the Arizona Diamondbacks. So, I mean, this is baseball. Anything can happen. And I think I don't know what everyone's expectations are, but I think there's real expectations of where this team can compete for the division in 2024. And like having all that depth is great, but I think we all can agree that the Tigers need some top end talent.
Boom! There he
this
goes.
offseason.
But it just got caught.
Oh, got caught.
Yeah. It looked like a home run. But John, I think you're right.
When he's circling the bases.
And then he keeps going like, it's a centripetal force.
Yeah.
I think, and I was thinking about this, like there are a good 4 or 5 middle infielders on the 40-man roster right now who they could theoretically get rid of. Like I mentioned some of the guys that they could bring up, like Lipsius Kreidler, Wenzel Perez, Eddie Leonard. Those are all guys like Nick Maton. Those are all guys that there might be something there, but there probably isn't. You don't know. And this is the hard part, right? Where you have all these guys that are sort of in the same area, and you got to figure out which ones can actually play and which ones can't. And it'll be kind of fascinating to see how that shakes out over the next couple of months, because there are too many bodies for the current. Like you said, there's not anybody like with really established jobs, but there are too many bodies right now. And so what do? Do they stick with Andy Ibanez? Stick with Zach McKinstry? Do they try to bring these new guys in and help with them? Do they make trades? It's hard for me to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, I personally think there's going to be some trades. I really believe that, and I'm sticking to my guns with that, because there's a reason why you bring in guys like. Yeah, I mean, obviously you want to see what you have with Eddie Leonard, but there's a reason why you bring him in. Whether he's, same thing. You got to make room for Justin Henry Malloy. You got to make room for Cole Keith. You got to make room. Essentially, I mean, Andre Lipsius is, and I think you were saying this before, Chris. Like, he may be like, "Thanks for playing. We appreciate you. We get the call up. Now you go to St. Louis or whatever." I mean, like, just because like I feel like he's the perfect Cardinal. But there is also the Rule 5, and there can be a couple of series of articles coming out here in the next couple of weeks over at Tiger Demo Report about Rule 5 possibilities too. Not only on the pitching side of things too, but on the positional side of things. They have to really. The Tigers have to make some tough decisions here in the next couple of weeks. And if they're going to add players to quote unquote supplement or be complementary to a young core, then that implies to me that they're going to look internal for some other answers, like Montero, like, again, I don't know if Olafian would be a guy who he's Rule 5 eligible, but how much attention he's going to get, and where are you going to put him? Because he's a guy also doesn't really. His strikeouts went up this year, but he's not. I don't know if he's going to be that same kind of guy when he gets up to major leagues, because he's got to have to put up better strikeout numbers in order to survive. I mean, that's just me. But if Erod, it also depends on what happens with Erod opting out, and I think he will opt out. But the Tigers, at least on the pitching side of things, in terms of trade bait, if the Tigers wanted to say trade Matt Manning or somebody else like that, I at least have there's a comfort knowing that Sawyer Gibson-Long can go in and pitch. Reese Olson can go in there and pitch. There's a comfort with that, so that's why I think the Tigers. I feel a lot more secure about the pitching depth this year heading into the offseason than I did last year.
Well, and I am. We don't have a whole lot of track record from Scott Harris, right? But we do have last offseason when he traded relievers. He traded Soto and he traded Jimenez, right? I could see Lang getting moved in a trade. We talked about it most of the year. You know, he was kind of up and down, but the stuff is there. And you could see another team certainly taking a chance on that for multiple years. I think you're right. I think one of those starters is going to get traded. I don't think they're moving Skubal. I think they might like to trade Matt Manning, but you might actually get more from like a Reese Olson or even Sawyer Gibson-Long because there's like a couple flashes of maybe higher upside there just in terms of strikeouts. But yeah, I think one of those starters, or you could even see. And we've discussed this before, and I think Raj told me this before, Wilmer Flores maybe being moved as a guy they have a handful of interesting arms down in the minors, and if a team wants a prospect arm, he seems like a guy who could go. Same with Ty Madden maybe. These are guys that aren't necessarily going to get you a king's ransom or anything like that, but as part of a package, they could be moved, I think, pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean Spencer Turnbull too is also wore out.
What are you going to get? What are you going to get for Turnbull?
Yeah,
now?
you're not going to get much for him. But what I mean is he's worn out his welcome.
Yeah.
I mean the org might have just ready to move on. But I mean honestly, it just seems that way.
There's two kinds of trades, right? Well, there's more than two, but the two I'm thinking of are this: are they going to trade one of their top talents to a team that fancies itself a contender and try to get a couple of really good young pieces back? That would be a Skubal type trade, right? Or are they going to take some of their young guys, Wenzel Perez, Ty Madden, Dylan Dingler, just whatever young name, and look to a team like Oakland who's looking for multiple young pieces to try to raid them for an established veteran to add to their lineup right now?
Yeah.
And that to me is going to be the fascinating part of what Scott Harris wants to do. Which of those two directions does he go? And you can make arguments for both, because if you think they only need to pick up 7 or 8 more wins and they can be in the playoffs, then you probably want to go after that established veteran.
Yeah, I think the veterans to me just sound more enticing. I mean, I've seen comments about Ryan McMahon. I mean, just players like that, because at the end of the day, you can have a great farm system. You can keep building up your farms. I mean, years ago, the Tigers had a top 5 farm system in baseball when Torkelson and Green were all prospects.
Well,
at least according to MLB Pipeline, they did.
Yeah.
Well, the MLB Pipeline is, as much as we respect their work, it's also, I mean, it's.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, they had 5 guys who were top 50, top 25 prospects, but they didn't have much behind them.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you bring up that name Torkelson.
Yeah.
Because how much better? Well,
No,
I mean, how much better do they think he can get?
Look at the idea that Mike Doyle threw in there, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, they could try to trade Casey Mize, but teams don't trade for guys who were injured and haven't come back yet. I can't remember the last time that actually happened. I'm sure it has happened, but it's not something I would do as a GM. I'd want to see him back pitching. And I'm not saying, like I said, with Torkelson, I'm not saying that you pursue trades there or something like that. But if other teams think he's got a higher ceiling than you do, who knows what they think he could do? Maybe they think he's just going to keep getting better year after year, and they think he's really going to be that MVP level hitter. But if they think maybe he's going to tap out kind of what he is right now, then they have some bats that they could conceivably play at first base in his stead.
Do you
They're
really
not
think
playing first base yet, but
you're gonna pitch that like this is the best that he can be though? And what 500, 600 major league at bats?
no, I'm just saying if they as an organization think that okay, this is he's never going to be more than a 240 hitter or a 250 hitter, and he's never going to hit more than 30, 35 home runs, and he's never going to be an above average defender at first base. There's certainly obviously he had a strong season. It's just as a former first overall pick, a guy that a lot of teams liked. You just might be able, if you want to make a big splash and get a big return, that might be your best asset right there, outside of maybe Tarek Skubal.
Yeah, I just don't know if you're going to be getting equal value in return. I don't know if there's a player out there that, has the ceiling that he does.
I do like Steven. I like Steve's idea here about make the swamp Manning for McMahon. Go hard after Nola. I know Chris was a big fan of Aaron Nola. We are all fans of him. The thing is, and Stan brings up a good point. Will the Tigers sign any unrestricted free agent positional players? This is the year. This is the time where it's like, okay, Chris Illich or that matter. The way again can't erase my mind of how I heard Scott Harris at the press conference. Complimentary players, where he didn't say indefinitely we're going to spend money on free agency, but it's not like a Dave Dombrowski where Dave Dombrowski was like, we'll see what happens, and then he does the opposite. Not Dave
signs
Dombrowski.
Everybody, yeah,
he signs everybody. That's not right now. I think Harris is exactly like what you see is what you get. You're just getting that kind of. There's no Al Avila interpreter system here, like I used to imply. No.
Yeah, well, when you say complimentary players, I feel like that kind of implies that he believes Torkelson, Green, Carpenter are kind of the guys that he's going to want to build around. I mean, if you want to take his word for it.
Or, I mean, he might even have a different core in mind. Who knows? I mean, you would like to think that if those guys would be it, I would assume they would be. I mean, Riley Green, yes, because you look at like Eddie's Leonard getting some time in the outfield. Or even Parker Meadows getting that call up. The reason why, to preserve Riley Green. You don't want another situation like Brian Buxton. It's to me, I think that's where the Tigers have to figure out exactly how they address their outfield. The biggest thing they have to do this year, and I've said this before, is the outfield this offseason. And if you're looking at some like under the radar guys, I think Steve brought up a really good question here. Who are some trade targets you like that no one is really talking about and are flying under the radar?
I got one I can pitch to you guys.
Go ahead.
So we talked about the Oakland A's. I'm gonna botch his last name more than likely. Zach Geloff, I believe. Is that how you say it? Geloff.
Yeah.
24 years old. Only 270 major league at bats, but hit 14 home runs, 841 OPS, hit 267. The Tigers need a right-handed bat in that infield. He's a guy you hope could maybe impact winning in 2024, but also is still young enough to where maybe he could potentially be a long-term option in the infield. So I think he kind of fits the profile of what you would be looking for.
Saw him play. Looks pretty good. No problems with him. I just think the one problem is he's the kind of player they want because he makes no money. So they're a little more likely to hold him for another 2 years until he makes, from when he goes to peanuts to making a little bit more than peanuts. Then they'll look to trade him. That's the only problem I see. But otherwise, that's a great player. I mean, he has the opportunity to be pretty decent.
Yeah, I haven't even considered sort of off the wall, under the radar trade targets. I might like to head to San Diego and see if you can get somebody from them. Maybe get Cronenworth off a down year. Ha-Seong Kim had an awesome year. I don't know if they'd be willing to move him, but they have 60 infielders. And they were talking about moving Bogarts to first base, right? So maybe somebody there, but yeah, that's a question I'd have to think on a little bit more, just to go around. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, all right, you want to find a team that's looking to, like, they're not necessarily maybe they're looking to tear down. But a team like that suddenly these players we don't think are available are, and San Diego feels a little bit like that to me.
And other teams that interest me are teams that are changing front offices. So there's the Red Sox, there's the Mets. I mean, they are teams that are going to bring in new people to head their front office, and they're going to want to put their stamp probably on their roster. So those are some teams you could look at and maybe find some decent players you might be interested in.
Trade Baez for Lindor.
I'd take
Boom.
that. Yeah, I mean, another team in terms of changing front offices, the Marlins. I mean, we've seen they've won World Series in the past and then have just completely torn down. And I mean, just looking at some bats, Jake Berger, they traded for him at the deadline. He's 27 years old. He could be your answer at third base. Some other guys like Brian De La Cruz. They have a couple bats that could be interesting as well in Miami.
I still feel like Miami is in search of bats, though. Who's their first baseman? Was
Josh
it Berger?
Bell? I think
Josh
Josh
Bell?
Bell.
Yeah,
You could probably use a Torkelson.
As far as under the radar is concerned, too, there was a guy I like in the Marlins organization, Paul Megatosh, who's been in the Arizona Fall League, and I don't know what Arizona for the Marlins. That I'm not sure what his I don't know. We have somebody on our please get rid of that.
I'm trying to get rid of it, man.
All right. So yeah, the Tigers I think might look for another. I think they might go catcher hunting. So as far as like a guy, I mean, what are the Marlins situation right now look at in terms of catcher up top? I mean, they also have a guy, but they have Will Banfield too. So they have two catcher prospects that could potentially see time next year. So they got to make room at some point. So maybe see what they have to offer for that. Because currently right now they have, I think it's Jacob. Yeah, they have Jacob Stahl. I mean, they have an older catcher. So one of those guys is going to make the team. The other one they have to consider. So, but yeah, like Chris, I would have to do more of a deep dive on that. But I was just thinking about this from a standpoint of like outside of my let's raid Baltimore's farm system. I have to think about this a little more because I think another team that you look at too is the Rockies. The Rockies, stay the hell away from their pitching prospects. Good Lord. It's a Tommy John nightmare out there.
Well, and some people were mentioning Ryan McMahon, and it's like the Rockies don't trade their homegrown players almost ever. That's like one of their problems. And even when sometimes they have good players, and sometimes they have middling players that they hold on for too long, but they get attached to their guys and they just don't move them. So
yeah,
it would be fun, but
because they never traded Story, right? They held on to Charlie Blackmon. Like they did trade Arenado, but
yeah, after extending him and then making him very angry, it was such a weird. They occasionally let guys go in free agency or whatever, but they clutch their prospects pretty tightly.
Yeah, I mean, Raj, you mentioned the catcher. I mean, this is probably pretty unrealistic, but William Contreras for the Brewers, we talked about them being a disappointing team. Now, he's 25 years old. I think he's probably going to be someone they want to build around, but I mean, he would fit right into this young core. And the Tigers, I think, certainly have the prospect depth if he was a player that would become available this offseason.
I would think so. And it's just the thing is that like if I'm the Tigers, I'm looking for a guy like if I'm the Tigers right now, I'm really looking for a guy. If I'm going to look for a young guy or a veteran that just can step in right away, as cliche as it sounds. I mean, I remember like we thought during the trade deadline that Vaughn Grissom was going to come to Detroit, and there was
I remember texting you about that.
There was we heard from a very reliable source that he was almost a Tiger. Almost. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. It's again one of those things where you will never know. But that being said, I think what's going to happen is this is what I predict. This is my Castillo crystal ball here in the next couple of months. CCD. I think this is what I'm going to do. All right. So in December, they're going to make a late November, either right after the trade or right after the World Series. We're going to hear that Erod is not coming back. Okay. So then there's going to be kind of quiet before Thanksgiving. And then right during the winter meetings, Tigers make a What? Steve, to answer your question, Vaughn Grissom was almost was a Tiger during the trade deadline, but again, neither confirm nor deny. That's what we heard down the pipeline. So my crystal ball prediction: by mid-December, the Tigers trade some prospects that we are familiar with. I think I'm gonna go. Okay, you know what? Because they had the Rule 5 draft. So they had the Rule 5 draft.
Get your envelope up by your head.
Yeah. Where's my envelope? You know what?
Karnak.
We're gonna use Karnak. We're gonna use Hunter sausages here by Kowalski.
Delicious.
Delicious. By the way, if you want to become a sponsor for the podcast, let us know. All right, I'm using my Hunter's sausage packets here. Okay. So my prediction here, to steal Hunter sausage Kowalski Hunter sausage prediction here, is that when the Tigers make a trade, they're going to trade. It's going to trade either say Andre Lipsius, Winfield Perez, and I don't see Ryan Kryler on this roster. I see two or maybe all three of those guys are on the roster. Okay, and I see a trade for a catcher, and I see a pitcher who is stuck. So I'm saying they're gonna sign maybe re-sign Michael Lorenz, maybe bring him back, and yeah, that's gonna be my early December. My shocking thing is that the Tigers are gonna trade 3 prospects that we're familiar with right now, at least 3.
Yeah. I feel like, just to keep it, I'm not saying what they should do, but I mean, I feel like there's a lot of bats that are going to be available in free agency that just make a lot of sense. Like, Raj, I know you brought up like Lourdes Gurriel. Like, I feel like he's just such a perfect fit for this team just because he's a right-handed bat. He can play the infield. He can play the outfield. Like, he has a great track record. He's coming off arguably the best season of his career. I mean, Tommy Pham, another guy with the Diamondbacks. I mean, he's a guy, a proven winner, a veteran as well. Mark Canha was a name I saw thrown around as well. So, I mean, to keep it simple, like, if there's a player out there that you think is going to make you better, you go for it. But I just think there's a lot of veterans that make a lot of sense for this team in free agency.
Gurriel Jr. would be fantastic. I would love that. I love that. That would be awesome. But as a fan, that's awesome. To cover the team, it's even better. But the Tigers don't. The Tigers right now don't strike me as the type of team that's gonna. Again, this is a chance for Harris to prove me wrong, but I just see, like it's almost like Scott Harris to me is an analogy that is dated, but it feels like he's the guy that goes to the book fair and has his book fair order filled out months in advance. You know he's gonna get the same 3 goose. He's gonna get the newest Goosebump books. You know he's gonna get the newest things. And he already has that order already filled out, ready to go. And he's not changing his mind what's on that book list. I know it sounds like a very dated reference, but remember how good jazz you get for the school book fair? I don't know about you, but I got.
Oh yeah. That was hype.
I'm surprised Chris doesn't have a. But Chris, I'm sure you have a better analogy, right?
Well, I don't know. I just wasn't a big book fair guy. The book fair's going on right now at my son's school, but
Is he
was
ordering anything or no?
I always just wanted the posters, like the sports posters or the Lamborghini posters. Like, I didn't want any books. Gross.
Does your son want any books or no?
No. He's been rocking with his current set of books right now that he's digging, and we already own them all. So I think he's not coveting anything in particular at the moment.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I don't know if you.
What?
Diary of a Wimpy Kid. That was a big thing for me.
So he's
Sideways School.
He's reading these books called The Last Kids on Earth, which is kind of like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid style. Like, there's plenty. It's a lot of visuals along with a lot of text, and it's just about a bunch of middle schoolers who are surviving in the zombie apocalypse.
Fun.
Nice.
No, so they're taking everything that's been trending and putting one thing in the kids.
Yeah, but it's lighthearted, if you will. Like, the
Sure.
kid's got a baseball bat, but it's splintered, and he calls it the Louisville Slicer, and that's what he uses to kill zombies and monsters. And then he gives himself like Xbox style achievements and they have a cool tree house and stuff. It's, I don't know, it's pretty fun. My son seems to dig it, but
It's an upbeat zombie apocalypse.
yeah, there was an animated series on Netflix for a little bit. 2 or 3
really?
seasons. Mark Hamill was in it.
sounds like it's just like zombies killing zombies sounds lighthearted. I mean, I've heard it all.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it is what it is. Hair seeds kale. All right. But again, I would love for the Tigers to change things up a little bit. We'll see what happens here. And but again, you also got to make room for guys like look at Justice Bigby. I mean, we talked about him a little earlier, but where does he fit in all this?
Well, I mean, that's one of the tough things. Justice Bigby, awesome story. Like, as you said, we wrote a story about it today. We talked about him all year though, but kid, he just hits. The kid can really hit, but the issue is that he's got to be a corner outfielder only, and I don't know if he's going to hit for enough power. His approach right now is just hitting scalding live drives from second base to like the second baseman, and sometimes he gets it over their head, sometimes he hits it out to right center or to right field. He pulls the ball only about 30% of the time, and I just don't know. Big league pitchers, I think, are just going to fire fastballs in on his hands, and he can fight them off for singles, but if he's not hitting 20 plus home runs as an outfielder, I don't know if you can survive in the big leagues. As much as I like his bat and I think it's an awesome story, but if
he strikes me as someone you just look at and say, do it again. You've had this good year, go do it again. If you do it again, okay, I'm interested. Maybe that's a little over the top to say that's harshly, but
I don't think so. I think we saw it with Kerry Carpenter, right? When you're drafted in the 19th round, you carry that stigma with you, no matter how well you perform in the minors. You have to keep proving it, and you have to prove it at the big league level. And he didn't get up to the big leagues this year. He got up to Toledo at the end of the year. He's in the NFL. He's doing AFL. I think I accidentally said NFL. He's in the AFL. He's doing pretty well, but. Yeah, like if it comes down between do we want to bring up Justice Bigby and make him a regular outfielder, or do we want to sign Teoscar Hernandez? I'm probably going to go with Teoscar Hernandez.
All day, all day.
But that's not, like I said, I like Justice Bigby, but he's got more to do, and I don't know if you can count on him to figure it out just yet. He's a nice player to have in the system, and it's a cool story. But other than that, I don't really know much if he's going to help the team next year.
Yeah, he's maybe one of those guys that starts off the year in Toledo, and you see what happens and go from there. And also, I mean, as far as like Rule 5 eligibility and what have you, he's not Rule 5 eligible till next year.
Yeah, he's a 21 draft pick, so there's no rush there. There's certain guys they don't have to add Colt Keith. Seems like they will, but they won't do that until they actually call him up. Now, whether or not they bring him up on opening day to try to hopefully get luck out and get that prospect promotion incentive, we'll see.
I do like the idea of what Steve said about Jeff McNeil, but the problem is that he tore his he has a UCL tear towards the end of the year, and he hasn't played third base. He hasn't played third base since last year, but he was primarily the second base for the Mets. That's not a bad idea, but if it's depending on the UCL tear, but if at that point. And also, in terms of production, too, he was actually slightly better than Ibanez. So that's not a bad idea for a left-handed stick. But you have to see how the elbow is. We'll see. Yeah. He plays both corner spots too in the outfield. He's like another version of Zach McKinstry, pretty much.
He's just a better hitter.
Yeah,
but I don't know if he has McKinstry's athleticism.
No.
Or Gold Glove caliber utility.
Yeah. Congratulations to speaking of that, we haven't mentioned that Zach McKinstry looking also to add some muscle. I saw an article about that he's looking to add some muscle. So
Jack McKinstry.
Yeah.
Damn it, I screwed up his last name.
Jack McKinstry.
Jacked McKinstry.
Jacked. There we go.
Jacked. I like it.
Jacked. All right. So before we get out of here, want to make a show announcement that our friend or the producer. So John has been with us since last year. Since we were at Woodward Sports, and we've had, and if anybody knows the show, like Chris and I have had, and maybe Yooper's witnesses too. We've had a couple of interns. I've worked with a couple of interns who are now working in other business or other walks of life. Our intern Bob Toole, for example, works for the Detroit Lions now. She was our production person, Chris. So I think Chris, she was one of our best production people
Yeah.
ever. She was,
I only met her that one time at Comerica when she was working with Dickerson, right?
yeah. But then remember all the audio stuff she did. She
Yeah.
was an audio wizard. But so John got a job with two organizations, one being the Detroit Red Wings, and also he'll be working for Valley Sports Detroit. So these internships, John, are they jobs?
Their jobs.
They're jobs.
Nice.
Okay. All right.
Taking over for Matt Shepard. It's very
Yeah.
impressive.
That's
Crown
amazing.
him. Crown him. So that being said, John, of course, because of conflicts of interest, can no longer do the show. So,
So
John is,
So tonight we're sacrificing him to the giant spider Shelob.
So John, John's, really, he's an ambitious young man. He's done a lot for the channel, for the growth of everything. And, he's been a really good, not only like host, but a good producer, probably one of the better producers we've had. So congratulations to him, because we here support people. We want young people to succeed. You know, like I sound like such an old fart when I said that, but
Yes!
we want.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Anytime
And
anybody can work in sports if they want to. It's
Yeah.
awesome, and we're happy to have been any sort of part of that. And I'm glad we're looking forward to seeing what you're going to do. I don't know if you're going to get out there on skates and try to take down DeBrincat.
I
Oh, I'll tell you, John, we're proud of you.
Absolutely.
You know, we've had a lot of fun this last year and a half or so. You and I have done some shows, just the two of us, when no one else was available. Always a good time. Really enjoyed it. You're like my geeky little nephew. That's how I always view you.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed giving you a hard time about your first date that time.
Yeah, you could afford
I've
more
got
than Arby's now,
remarks
can't
about
you?
that than anything you've ever done. But we'll miss you, and I just want to wish you the best.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think that Jace Young has a message for you. There we go.
Oh,
That was
Nice.
he dedicated that home run to you. It's crazy.
Yeah.
He
Thank you.
dedicated that home run to you. So that was
First-
off. Yeah. It's nice.
yeah.
That's a nice blaster. But no, seriously, I am stoked for John because he has people want tears, and I'm
I was getting emotional, honestly, man.
Oh, it's
off
good,
the-
man. Listen, you worked really hard. All those clips and stuff, all that stuff. It wasn't me. So yeah, we're proud of you, and we're
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing what you do. And come back later when you're hosting your own show, and you can be a guest or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or if one of us needs a freelance job, it's crazy.
Yeah, true. Yeah, maybe you're going to hire us. Like,
Don't forget where you came from.
I have some
I will-
goaltending experience.
No,
I
it's
will forget.
no, but seriously, like John carried the weight of the site when in August and September when both of us were busy with the minor league stuff, and so it's nice to have a kind of like support, and we're all so. By the way, so if you're looking for an intern or somebody who wants to learn podcasting business, you know how to get a hold of me. We're looking for like somebody that can do the stuff that John can do. Because now I have to figure out how to manage two different channels, get clips and all that stuff, and it's a lot of work. And so, yeah. But either way, John is a talented human.
I'm going to miss hearing from John's dad and John's grandpa once in a while.
I love John's family.
with
Salt
lost
of the earth
family
people.
information that I'm supposed to use on the show.
I remember one of the first videos he sent me was him dancing around his house, and I'm not going to show that. That was.
Oh,
one of
I know what you're talking about.
I still laugh about it to this day because it's the most random.
I'm gonna have to find that one, man.
You need to share that. You need to share that because everyone needs to see that. It is one of the funniest. Oh man.
But yeah, I guess if I could get my final word in, just thank you to everybody who listened. Yeah, I appreciate it. All the nice comments we would get. Everybody who tuned into the show. Raj, thank you so much for. I wouldn't be getting this opportunity if it wasn't for you. I mean, you gave me a chance. I mean, I didn't have really any experience. I just had a passion for the baseball and for this, and you allowed me to show that, and I'm very grateful for that. Yooper, you've given me a lot of good advice, and I'll carry it with me. Chris, I'm glad you're back, and continue to kill it as always. Yeah, it means a lot, and I'm very grateful that I was able to be able to do this, and I really have enjoyed it.
No, it's one of those things where people, it's hard to break in stuff like this. It really is, and people in this line of work and MLB stuff, there's always some sort of level of like nepotism and stuff. We talk about that all the time. It's like who you know, and it gets forgotten about. And if I can help anybody out learn their skill set, you like I said, the first time you did it, like I was like, all right, this guy's gonna work out, because you have to be driven. Yeah, if you're driven, then you can go anywhere. That's all it is to it. I mean, we had an intern, I'm not gonna say names, that they were kind of weird. But we've also but overall,
she wore a beret, waiting for me in the line. It was weird.
She worshipped.
That's a joke. Dating before John was born. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of
that's a good one right there.
97.
Yeah, but on that note, yeah. So, like I said, we'll be back. So next week we'll be probably for next week we'll be doing maybe something towards the latter part of the week as the World Series continues. We might even just take the World Series off, or come up with something after the World Series, because I guarantee you things will probably be hot and heavy for a while. But expect some more content over our YouTube channel, Tiger Minor League Report, and some stuff on here. I'm going to start doing some deep dives back into Tiger history, so expect some stuff on that on the short side. Thanks for everybody tuning in this evening. We really appreciate it. Again, as far as formatting goes, like I said, if you nothing's really going to change. Just still be the three of us, and we'll look for somebody else to kind of fill the void a little bit. And again, John, congratulations to you. And people know where to find you on Twitter and all that stuff. So we'll keep you posted on when the next show is going to be. But like I said, I think with the World Series, I want to kick back and watch it. I'm glad we waited till tonight too, because that was a really good game last night, and that's why I postponed it till today. So, but yeah, go to TigersMLReport.com. Check out Chris's article on Justice Bigby and the other players that break out too. In terms of other players like Sawyer Gibson-Long, Trey Cruz, some really good stuff there. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everybody. Be safe. Happy Halloween. I'm not sure if anybody's doing anything on Halloween. I don't know what people do for Halloween. You guys doing anything for Halloween?
I'll be going out with my son trick-or-treating.
I need to find a costume still. So
I'm passing. I think I'm going to pass out candy for the first time in a while.
There you go.
I was thinking about like just sitting on the porch and being like just all weird and like just like, you know how you sit in the chair like you don't move.
Throw on the LT Gray mask.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. The LT Gray mask I have not worn that in a while. So, all right, guys, We'll talk to you soon. Have a good week, everybody. And I hope that we get a good, entertaining World Series. That's all we can ask for. I thought John was your son.
Okay.
All right, look. Come on, man. All right, we're out of here.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Steve.